Hi everyone, Tyler Manion here, NPC and IFBB Pro League Vice President. And today will be the recap for the 2024 Empro Classic, the Open Bodybuilding. And this is brought to you by Uprising, powered by Mid45. So to get into it, we had a very solid top four at this show. We'll go through the comparison between the top two of William and Beiruz to start with. Obviously, this was a very close show. And this is one of those apple and oranges comparisons with both guys having very different strengths and weaknesses. So obviously the strength for Beiruz is his overall shape and proportions. He has very, very good shape. And then we have William, who really brought the density and 3D look to the show, also with very, very good conditioning. So we'll start out and go through pose by pose. First pose up is the front double bicep. In this pose here, you see that Beiruz has a very, very good taper. He's very complete from the arms down to the taper, down to a nice small waist. Now, what he needs to bring up here is his quads from the front. He needs more size to the quads here to balance out his upper body. And he also needs more separation to the quads. So in prejudging in the morning, I think he really needed the more separation. He got better with his conditioning at night. However, the separation still could be better. And I think he definitely can come in a little bit better when it comes to that. William in the front double bicep. William has a lot of muscle. I think his quads definitely came back up in size. You can see he had good separation there as well. However, his overall shape and taper here does not compare very well to Beiruz's. He still has a lot of dense muscle, but overall, when you look at this pose, I think it goes to Beiruz to make it 1-0. Next up is the front lat spread. So here in the front lat spread, again with Beiruz, very good fullness and muscularity through the arms and the shoulders and the chest, coming into a very, very good taper with a nice small waist. Again, with the lower body, as I covered, quads could be a little bit bigger, quads could be a little bit more separated. Now with William, he has good muscularity through the arms and the shoulders. His chest was not displaying the same thickness as Beiruz. Also, his taper and waist, his taper was not as wide. His waist was not as small. So obviously Beiruz had a better taper. When you got into the lower body, I thought William's quads did look better from the front than Beiruz's. But overall, with the flow and balance of the pose and the overall muscularity shown here, I feel like Beiruz edged out this pose to make it 2-0. Next up is the side chest pose. So this pose was definitely a close pose between the two. You see with Beiruz, again, good arms and shoulders, very good chest thickness, solid width across the top. He could keep his shoulders a little bit more level to actually even increase that width that he has up top. His side leg was very solid. I feel like he added tissue to his side leg and made it more balanced between the quad and the hamstring. Now, William has a lot of depth and detail to this pose. He has good arms and shoulders. His chest was displaying good thickness and a lot of striation. His side leg was very, very separated and very, very detailed. Also, I think his hamstrings definitely made a comeback here from what we saw from him previously, back towards what he was a couple of years ago. When it comes to the side leg size, they were very, very close in size in person. But overall, the detail and the separation and the density that was brought out in this pose by William is what gave him the side chest. So again, that great equalizer of the 3D look plus the conditioning. And throughout prejudging and throughout finals as well, even though Beiruz's conditioning was a little bit better, it still didn't match up to William's. That gave William the pose, make this 2-1. Next up is the back double bicep pose. So a very strong pose for both gentlemen here. Beiruz, again, great through the arms and the shoulders, coming down into a nice taper and wide back. However, his back, I feel like, could be more separated and a little bit more dense. Lower body-wise, I think his glutes and hamstrings here from the back display a little bit better than his quads do from the front. He has good separation and pretty good leg width from the back. Now we go over to William. William has good arms and shoulders as well. His back is not as wide, so his taper is not as good, but it is very, very dense. very thick, and gives you that 3D pop on stage. His legs from the back were also great as well. They were very dug in, very balanced with his upper body. And really the conditioning, again, was really, really shining through. So while Behruz has good, I think, good muscle to his back, it could be denser and it could also display a little bit more separation. Again, his conditioning from prejudging to finals got better, but the separation still could be better, especially when you're comparing to someone like William, who has a very dense and 3D looking back. You know, this is the reason why William was an Arnold Classic winner, an Olympia runner-up. He never had the greatest structure. He never had the greatest width. But when you can have that depth and density and 3D look, all while displaying really, really good conditioning, it's the great equalizer in bodybuilding and really changes the look of a pose. So for me, William takes this pose to make it 2-2. Next up is the back lat spread. So in the back lat spread, I think both of these guys actually make a little bit of a mistake. They roll their shoulders forward a little bit too far, which flattens out their backs. But since they're both making the mistake, it really didn't hinder either one too much against each other because they were both doing the same thing. We'll go to Behruz first. Obviously, Behruz having that wider structure with the smaller waist really comes into play in this back lat spread pose. He has good thickness to his back, but again, the density and the separation could be better. Lower body wise, the same as the back double pose. He's more balanced here from the back than he is in the front. Conditioning was good. Not amazing, but it was good. William here does not open up his lats as much as he could, in my opinion. He's rolling his shoulders forward, which makes that harder to do. That also flattens out his back more. So that 3D look and that density that he displays in the back double is not evident here in the back lat spread. His lower body obviously is very good. The hamstrings and the glutes were dug out. The leg width was there. The separation, the detail was there. But overall, when you go head to toe in this pose, Behruz takes it to make it 3-2. Next up is the side tricep pose. So here for Behruz, I think he leans forward with his upper body. He's leaning forward a little bit too much. He also could control his midsection a little bit better so he stays on his abs the whole entire time. Thickness through the arms, the shoulders, and the chest are very good. The side leg here, actually with the side that he poses on, I don't think he is posing it as good as he poses the side leg from the side chest pose. Because of this, he actually loses a little bit of that size from the side here in the side tricep. Now we go over to William, and William is hitting a side tricep, more of an old school variation. Something that I think when a lot of guys do, they lose volume to their pose. However, William is one of the very, very few that can have his leg placement like this, and still you are seeing that hamstring drop and getting the size to the overall side leg. His arms and shoulders are very detailed and separated. His chest has good enough thickness through here, and the way he is hitting this pose, his waist is sucked in and his waistline actually looks very good with very defined abs. Overall, his conditioning again was giving him that 3D look to this pose. A overall very, very strong pose for him. Behruz with his posing mistakes, I think, was hurting what should be also a very, very strong pose for him with his structure and how he can hit the pose. However, his conditioning was not up to Williams as well. So for me, this was a pretty clear pose for William to make it 3-3. Next up is the ab and thigh pose. For me, this was Williams' weakest pose. He was pulling up his stomach almost into like a half vacuum here and not really crunching down on the abs at all. With his taper and his width, I think he would be better served with crunching down on the abs. Also, in my opinion, actually, I think he should be doing one of the only one arm overhead, crunched half crab, ab and thigh. That way, he is not really displaying the taper, but he's displaying the thickness and the detail throughout his physique. His legs, his quads from the front, obviously, are solid with good separation. I think if he would just change his upper body and the way he would hit this pose, it could be a much better pose for him. Now with Behruz, obviously he has that great taper into a nice small waist. His upper body looks great. Lower body wise, the quads could be bigger to get more of that balance between the upper and the lower and also more separated. But when you're looking at them standing next to each other, this is a clear pose for Behruz. I also think that this could become a much, much stronger pose for Behruz as well if he would adjust his posing with this too. He almost hunches over with his shoulders a little bit too much. He could actually be displaying even more width and taper throughout the lats into his small waist. And everything could be a little bit more defined as well. So I think this is a pose that he could really take to the next level with a couple of tweaks. But having them stand next to each other, this was a pose for Behruz to make it 4-3. And then last up is the most muscular pose. So what's interesting about this pose is I think when they both had their hands clasped together, standing straight up, I think this was an actually close pose. Why was it a close pose? Because Behruz really displays a lot of muscularity and thickness through his upper body in this pose. However, it does throw the balance off again, like I've mentioned before in the front poses, with his quads not being quite big enough and not being quite separated enough. His overall width shoulder to shoulder is also very imposing in this pose. So with William, his overall width shoulder to shoulder is obviously not as wide and not as good as Behruz. However, the lower body is better. The overall balance, upper to lower body, is better. And because of the conditioning difference, he was really popping in this. So if they would have just stayed in this pose, I still would have given the edge to William just by a hair. But they also transitioned into the crab, bent over crab, most muscular pose. When they were doing this, it really, really showed off the conditioning and the 3D intensity of William's muscle. All striated throughout the chest. The chest looks thicker when he does this pose. The shoulders and the arms are great. They're detailed. And obviously the lower body, the quads look good. The quads are also separated and detailed. When Behruz did this, you see that even throughout the chest, his chest might have been thicker, but it was not displaying that detail and those striations that Williams were. The lower body, again, is not as balanced to the upper body. And because the conditioning wasn't the same, the conditioning wasn't shining through as much in this pose. So I actually personally like Behruz to stay standing up straight with the hands clasped better. It's another example of don't just transition into a pose because the person next to you is transitioning into it. Sometimes just hitting your best pose is better for you. But again, actually, William looked even better when he was hitting the crab most muscular. And that sealed the deal for this pose, which makes it 4 poses to 4. So now it's 4 poses to 4. I had it 4 poses to 4 both at prejudging and at finals. Even with the difference in Behruz's conditioning, I thought they both took the same exact poses in both rounds. So now it comes down to that's where it comes down to apples and oranges. Like I said, it's an apple and oranges comparison. And really, on this day, I think the separation, the detail, the density, and the overall 3D look that William brought, combined with the conditioning, was just enough to edge out Behruz. I think, it was my first time judging Behruz in person. I really think he has a ton of potential. Just looking at his progression, I feel like he has improved his legs from the side and from the back. If he improves the legs from the front, if he improves the posing, and if he improves the separation throughout his back, the density to his back, and the overall conditioning, I think this guy is just going to keep rising up the ranks. He has so much potential. And just another thing at the finals that I wanted to point out is, when a show is really this close, for me, and I know Steve does the same thing as well, we really like to pose these guys and pose them hard. This is part of the sport. You need to have posing conditioning. And at the end of the finals, the final round, it was the 4th time overall, but the 3rd time of them being out there just alone, the 3rd time through, make sure they're okay. They said they're good to go. And we take them through again. And Behruz really started to break a little bit during this as well. He started to sweat. It was hard for him to control his posing, control his poses. Even through the stomach, he wasn't breathing through the chest anymore. He's starting to breathe through the stomach. And William was standing there more like a statue, just going through it. Everything was breathing through the chest. His conditioning wasn't fading. The overall separation wasn't fading. And that final round really is what made the difference, for me in the posing at the finals, because Behruz, I told you, did improve his conditioning from prejudging to finals, but that posing conditioning is a big, big thing. I mean, when we have guys that are super close, obviously, again, the panel was still split at this show. you know, there's arguments for both guys. For me, that posing conditioning really comes into play. So it doesn't matter whether you're an NPC competitor, you know, hoping to get a class win or an overall win at your local show, all the way up to the top pros. You need to have posing conditioning because the judges are going to pose you, and breaking and making mistakes on the poses and just, you know, losing that separation and fading on stage could be the difference between a win. So that's what it came down to for me. That's why William edged it out, even though the poses were 4-4, both at prejudging and at finals. That posing conditioning, overall density, 3D look, and separation is what took it for him. So great show by these two. And I think bodybuilding has been very, very exciting this year. In third place, we had Michael. So for Michael, I think the main thing was his conditioning was just not there today. He needs to really, really bring in that conditioning, dial in. So not only is he peeled, but he's also separated everywhere. The main things that he needs to work on is his overall back. He needs more density to his back in the back poses. He also needs more width to his back in the back poses. So in the back double, you want to see more density there. You want to see more width. In the back lat spread, the same exact thing. You want to see more density and you want to see more width. I also think he can bring the legs up just a little bit more overall because he is very upper body dominant. The overall balance is not bad, but it definitely could be better between the upper and the lower. In the back poses, he definitely needs to also bring up the glutes because, again, we're looking at the overall balance of the whole entire pose. So the muscularity there, if you're lacking, can throw off the balance of the pose as well, which wasn't helping him. So conditioning back a little bit more to the overall legs. And a big, big thing he needs to work on is his posing. So he needs to pose better just in general, and he also needs to work on his posing conditioning. We kept Michael out there in prejudging to pose with the other two guys to take him through a couple rounds at the end, and he was really struggling to get through once we went to the third round. It was a very, very big struggle for him. I think one of the mistakes he makes is he squeezes insanely hard in every single pose. So when you're doing this, it takes much more energy and much more out of you. And you see the best posers, they don't look like they're struggling and squeezing and shaking the whole entire time they're posing, because if they did, the same thing would happen. It would be impossible to keep that posing conditioning. So he really, really needs to take some time and work on the posing, not only the way he's hitting the poses, but also the posing conditioning, and not to overly squeeze and be more relaxed while he's going through his mandatories. In fourth place, we had Sasan. I think he had a great comeback. I actually saw him at the last show he did out at the California Pro quite a long time ago. I don't know if it was 2018 or 2019. For him, his conditioning overall was good. He could be a little bit more conditioned. He's just a little bit flat, especially from the front. He could have that more separation, which would give him more pop to his overall physique. The back double, he could pose it better. His arms are raised a little bit too much. He could also use a little bit more thickness and density back there. The same thing with the back lat spread. The same thing applies. Overall, if he can just dig out that conditioning a little bit more, and that separation and that pop to his physique will give him a very good look. He has a very clean look overall with a great taper. His overall balance is also, I think, very, very good. So just working on those couple of things, I think hopefully he'll hit another show or two this year so he could really work on that peak. And if he peaks right, he's just going to be a tough guy to deal with, if he does a couple more shows this year. So another guy that is making open more exciting, a great comeback. And again, like I just said earlier, I think open bodybuilding has been extremely exciting this year, and it's all pointing towards an unbelievable Olympia at the end of the year.